Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for your presence and your interest in this, the four topics that are going to be presented today in this panel. Before I introduce the panel members, I would like to thank the INVALSI committee, the organizing committee of this seminar, but specifically to Patricia, because she recently was invited and presented information about INVALSI in the National Institute for the Evaluation of Education in Mexico. So she presented very important information that opens doors for sister institutions. So we have a lot of similarities between Mexico and Italy. So it's really good to be here. Thank you very much, Patricia, for your invitation, and everyone for being here. So this panel has four presentations. The first one is going to be presented by me, and it has to do with large-scale assessment and the development of instruments with a particular methodology that is called automatic item generation. I will talk about it in further detail, but it has to do with the merging of cognitive sciences, psychometrics, and assessment engineering. So it is the topic that I'm going to be discussing. And after that, the second and third presentations have to do with different approaches, methodological approaches for the merging of data information from INVALSI's national examinations and the ICC, the civic and citizenship study done or coordinated by the IEA, and the merging of these databases to analyze from different perspectives the results of math and reading and literacy. And these presentations are going to be led by our colleagues in Chile from the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile, particularly the Measurement Center, MIDE UC, in that university, and the University of Bath, but they have collaborated with the European Commission, specifically with Daniel Bidoni, and with Maria Magdalena Isa from the University of Groningen. And Daniel Miranda is going to present the third information, the third presentation. And the fourth one, the last one, is going to be presented by Lorenzo Rocco from the Università di Padova. And he collaborates with two other colleagues, Giorgio Brunello and Angela Crema. And they have done a study with data sets from the INVALSI national examinations, and they have explored this information to establish or to see if there's a relationship between students' levels of proficiency or results in the examinations, the national examinations, and the particular or the specifics of the position of the different items of the test, and if these items, these dispositions, have to do with the final results of the students. So these are the four presentations for today. So now I'm going to start with the applications of automatic item generation in large-scale student assessments. My presentation is divided into two parts. I will not go very deep into the concepts of automatic item generation, but I will do a mapping, a general mapping of it. And the second part of my presentation, I'm going to show you an example of a large-scale assessment that was developed with automatic item generation, and I will show you one item that can be generated many times with parallel items. Okay, so one one of the main concepts behind automatic item generation is something called item model. We all know what an item specification is. And I will show you the particulars of item models behind what we, when we develop large-scale assessments. And so this exam that I'm going to present to you is was developed in Mexico by a team of researchers to assess what core knowledges, abilities, and competencies students have from their learning from kindergarten or preschool through the whole compulsory system, educational system in Mexico that ends in 12th grade or high school. So what is automatic item generation? I told you that it has principles of cognitive sciences behind it. Also, it combines what we know about analytical approaches from psychometrics, and also it uses, this is very important, it uses assessment engineering and software technology in order for it to function properly. So it is very important to have software engineers during the process and communicate them when you are developing your assessment. And this item model is one of the most important elements, as I mentioned, that helps us create a large amount of parallel items. We can call them isomorphs, but really isomorphism is very difficult to achieve as a real strong concept. But we can generate items that have a certain level of difficulty that meet criteria that we establish a priori. So what is an item model? It has been called many names. Through the last 50 years, item models have been called, in the late 60s, they were item forms, and then some other researchers used the term frames. For the first time, item model was used as a tool for developing these isomorph items. So that was a very important thing in time. They have also been called shells, and you will notice why in a few minutes. Also schemas, because of the theory behind them when they were working in the early 2000s with these type of methodology. Also blueprints and templates. Template is the most common name that we will find, but now, as any emerging science, now the term is more homogeneous between the different research papers, and we find item models as the main term. So what is the difference between an item model and an item specification? The main difference is that when you have an item model, you have different elements. This is when the term shell gives a very good meaning to the item model, because you have different elements that you put in, take out, and interchange with certain rules and certain restrictions. And these rules and restrictions had to be very well thought of, very well established by the experts, the best experts that you can find. So these rules, restrictions, and interchangeable elements yield a large amount of items that can be constructed by the means of software and algorithms to produce parallel items. I am really very careful in using the term isomorph because of what I explained a little bit earlier, but that is the concept. You can develop item models by two ways, by two paths. By strong theory, where you have to have it's very important to have experts in cognitive theory, because when you use strong theory, that means that you have a cognitive map of the underlying processes that are needed in order for the students or the examinees to give a correct answer. So you know everything that happens inside their mind, and every step that is needed to give a correct answer, and this is very difficult to achieve. So you need very, very, very experienced people. And this way of developing item models means that you do not have to do field trials, that you can establish a priori the psychometric properties that you want all of the items that you generate to have. So this is something that is very different to what we know up till now for test development. And the other way of making, developing item models is through weak theory. This term is for me personally, I don't like it that much, because weak tends to give a wrong idea, because it's not a weak theory. The thing is that if you have, for example, a national examination that's based on the curriculum, that would be weak theory, because it's not a direct cognitive theory with a cognitive map of the process, the underlying processes of the correct response that you have in order to develop all of these, the elements needed to generate the items. But you have a curriculum, but the curriculum always has underlying theories, pedagogical, educational, psychological, that are very strong, proven, of course, but they are indirectly linked to the development of the assessment. So the way that you develop the items is by using existing items from a bank of items, or existing items that you never use but have proven their psychometric properties. Also, this means that you have to have experts with a lot of experience, very good intuition, very creative, you will see why, and with very strong theoretical and research background. So this is the difficult part of the process. Okay, so once you have the item models, you can expedite the process of developing the large-scale assessments. So this is something new and something very good. Instead of, we're used to having with the item specifications, one or maybe two or three parallel items that come out of a specification. With item models, you can have 10, 20, 100, 1,000, 10,000 items, but the difficult part, as I said, is having the correct experts in the beginning of the process. Okay? And now I'm going to show you an example of the applications of automatic item generation in one large-scale assessment that was developed in Mexico. And this is an entrance exam that is used in more than 15 institutions and recently has been adopted by universities, Jesuit universities in Guatemala. So you need, as I said in the beginning, software engineers from the beginning of the development process, because this information software, we have in this exam a specific software that we call generator of exams. That's the meaning of the term. But this software has to store all the information that is derived from the item model, all of the specifics, all of the elements, all of the rules and the restrictions in order to create all of these algorithms that produce the different items. So all the procedures that allow you to generate any amount of items from one model specifications have to be in the software. And it also administrates the application of the examination. It scores automatically, and it can do whatever software can do. Of course, as any other exam or assessment instrument, this exam was developed with a specific methodology, a proven methodology, with different phases and stages to gather validity evidence. And the general features is the first exam in Mexico and the only one up till now that has been that is based on automatic item generation. And actually, in the world, we have very, very few instruments, assessment instruments that are being developed and that are being used with automatic item generation. Canada has a national medical licensure examination. The United States has a couple from ETS, has a couple of instruments, but it's relatively new. And this exam has 3 validity studies up till now: a cognitive validity study, a construct, and a content validity study. The three studies are product of 3 PhD dissertations. And remember, I told you that the software has to have all of the information inputted in order to generate the items. Well, if you see it in that point, from that point of view, we have 22 different types of item models from a software point of view. Because if you want to generate items that have figures or tables, you need a specific program. If you want to generate items with text, you have to have another type of programming, so on and so forth. So we have 22 different software item models. But the total of items or item models are 180 because this particular instrument, because it's an entrance exam, it has from all subject matters, math, literature, geography, chemistry, everything inside of the software. So the items are classified and analyzed by 3 types from 3 points of view: from the cognitive abilities behind them, from the type of response that is needed from the examinee, and the actions that the examinee does when he or she responds. And these are examples of the 3 types of items. We have a drag and drop item. As you can see on the top, we have the item stem, the traditional item stem, but one particular thing that software allows us to do is not to have one correct answer as multiple choice has. For example, this item has 5 correct answers. The only thing that the student has to do is click, drag, and drop with the use of the mouse all of the 5 elements and classify them into 2 categories. These are animals, oviparous, or viviparous. And the other type of item is the element selection that also with the use of the mouse you can click, and you can have different amounts of elements missing, and if the students click on one of the parts of the item, dialog box will appear and he or she will select the answer or the answers. And the last one is the writing, the writing items. These are open-ended questions if you want to see them like that. And it's easier in math, chemistry, and physics to have these type of items. So the students do not have any clues, don't have any guidance, they just need to know the answer. Okay, so the item model components are three main components. The identification information, the characteristics of the contents that are being assessed, and the template. where all the information for the creation of the algorithm is. The identification of information is where does the content come from? If it's from the curriculum, what part of the curriculum, and what topics, and etc., etc. The second part are the characteristics. These have to do with why it is important to assess this content and not others. What part of the content are we going to assess? Because we cannot assess every element of the content. The content boundaries and what knowledge and skills underlie the correct answer. And the template, the most important part and the one that makes it different from the traditional way of developing items is what type of assessment approach we are using. This is the description of what we call families, parents, and and sibling items can we produce with what type of elements, what are the rules, what are the restrictions, to not make, for example, the difficulty vary that much between them. This is what we call a template. Remember all of the names that I mentioned at the early part of my presentation. Template is also being used because it helps to clarify and imagine how an item is going to be generated. For example, we have two families for polygons, for fractions. To assess fractions, we have two families that can generate parents, and those parents can generate a large amount, each one of them a large amount of sibling items. And this is what we produce with one of the families. For example, we have proper fractions on the left, and in the middle, the figure, the polygon that we're going to use for the student to give his answer, what he's going to see in the interface. And on the right column, we have the rules that we're going to use to create the algorithm. And this is what the student sees with the first family. He has to select in the polygon the parts of the figure. They do not have to be continuous. The parts of the figure that represent 2/5 of the figure. And the other family is this one. Instead of clicking on the figure, he or she has to write what the figure, the white parts of the figure are representing in a fraction sense. Okay, so to finish, it is very complex. It is a long process. You have to have very good experts in this process, but this is one of the most important things or elements that you have to have in automatic item generation is good people. Very, very good people. You have to train them. The training has to be very precise, you have to be very clear, and if the people that are involved don't have any questions during the process, you have to instigate in them some doubts so they can have all the process very, very clear. So you have to have very well trained item model developers. All of the instructions inside the document called item model that is going to feed the software have to be very precise, because if it's not, then you will have a lot of trouble generating the items. So this means that automatic item generation is very cost effective, because once you have it, you don't have to do the process of developing items every 2 years or 3 years, because the items, they tend to burn. You have the item model that can make, in this exam, we have item models that, with the permutations that we did, the different combinations, we had 150,000 different items. The challenge is to test the psychometric properties. That is why this is an emerging science. We don't have all the answers, but I invite you to do a lot of research here. So it helps to, it allows us to have high quality items, and it gives a lot of security to test administration. This is one of the very, very important parts of this methodology. We joked when we had developed the item, the exam, and we were applying it. If that we said, the research team, we joked about if someone stole the computer and all the information, just give them the grade, because if they memorize every detail of all of the item models, they're genius. It's a lot of information there. So our challenges are technical, but also with infrastructure. For example, in Mexico, we have a lot of differences, gaps, very, very, very wide, socioeconomic. So some schools don't even have internet, don't have computers, but we've learned to solve it. If you want more information, I will be very, very glad to explain a little bit more after the presentation. So grazie mille.